The last person hugged me at the door and said, "Your father was a good man." I nodded. I smiled. I said thank you. And then I closed the door behind them and stood in the hallway of a house that suddenly felt like a stranger's home. The funeral had ended an hour ago. My father, Reginald Osei, had been buried on a gray Tuesday morning with a small crowd, a short eulogy, and a lot of people saying things they clearly rehearsed on the drive over. I was 34 years old. I had just buried the only parent I had ever known. And I was not sure how I felt about that. I was not crying. I kept waiting for it. That wave of grief people talk about, but it never came. What came instead was exhaustion, and a strange, low hum of something I could not name. I moved through the rooms mechanically, tidying things that did not need tidying, just to have something to do with my hands. That is how I ended up in the garage. My father's garage was his sanctuary. You know those dads who guard certain spaces like they contain classified government information? That was my father and that garage. Nobody touched his workbench. Nobody borrowed his tools without a formal request and implied consequences. That old red metal toolbox in the corner had sat there for as long as I could remember, padlocked more often than not, and I had never once been curious about it. Until that evening. The padlock was open. Maybe he forgot it in his last weeks. Maybe he left it that way on purpose. I do not know. But I crouched down, lifted the heavy lid, and started moving things aside. Wrenches. Pliers. A screwdriver set still in its plastic case, never opened. And then, underneath all of it, taped flat to the bottom of the box, was an envelope. Old. Yellow at the edges. Sealed. I pulled it free and turned it over. The handwriting on the front was neat and careful, like someone who had taken their time, like someone who had wanted every letter to be perfect. It said, "To my daughter. The day you were born." I sat down on the cold garage floor and did not move for a long time. The woman who wrote this was my mother, Loretta. The woman my father had told me, in the few conversations we ever had about her, had simply left, walked out, did not want the responsibility, did not love us enough to stay. That woman had written me a letter the day I was born, and my father had hidden it at the bottom of a toolbox for 34 years. Let me tell you what I knew about my mother growing up, which was almost nothing, because in our house, asking about Loretta was approximately as welcome as knocking over a glass of water on important paperwork. My father would go rigid. His jaw would set. He would say, "She is gone. That is all you need to know." And that would be the end of it. I learned to stop asking around age 8. Not because I stopped wanting to know, but because watching my father shut down that way made me feel guilty for wanting more. Like missing her was somehow a betrayal of him. So I built a story for myself using the scraps I had. She left because she was selfish. She left because she did not want a baby, did not want a life like that. She chose freedom over us. That was the story. I believed it because I had nothing else to believe. My father was not a warm man, but he was present. He showed up. He worked hard, kept the lights on, made sure I had what I needed. I respected that. I told myself that was enough. I told myself that a father who stayed was worth more than a mother who left. But sitting on that garage floor, holding that envelope, I realized I had been working with incomplete information my entire life. I opened the letter. The paper inside was thin, the kind that gets soft and fragile with age. The writing was the same careful hand as the envelope. And I read it slowly once and then again, because the first time I think my brain refused to fully process what it was saying. She started by telling me my name. She said she had chosen it before I was born, had fought for it, had wanted me to have a name that felt like something solid to stand on. Then she wrote, "I need you to know that I did not leave you. I want that to be the first thing you understand about me. I did not leave. I was pushed out and told that if I tried to come back, I would regret it. I tried anyway, more than once. I was turned away every time." I stared at those words for a long time. She went on, "Your father is not who you think he is. I know that is a hard sentence to read. I know he is the one who raised you, and I am a stranger to you by now. But there are things that happened that you deserve to know. Things I was silenced for. Things I tried to tell people and was made to look unstable for saying. I am writing this letter because I want there to be at least one place where the truth exists. Even if you never find it. Even if he destroys it. At least I will have written it. If you are reading this, it means somehow, somewhere, the truth survived. Only the real ones make it this far. Comment where you're watching from, and subscribe so you never miss an episode. I folded the letter and sat in the dark for a very long time. I did not sleep that night. I lay in my childhood bed and stared at the ceiling and started pulling at every loose thread I could remember. Because once you read something like that, you cannot unread it. Your brain starts doing archaeology, digging through old memories and holding them up to a different light. The study that was always locked. My father said it was because he kept financial records in there and did not want anything disturbed. That made sense when I was 10. It made less sense now. The 3 times we moved when I was growing up. Never a clear reason given. New opportunity, he always said. Better area. I never questioned it. Children do not question those things. My Aunt Philippa, my father's older sister, who used to visit regularly when I was small, who brought me little gifts and held my hand when we walked, and called me her heart, who then, somewhere around my 9th or 10th birthday, simply stopped coming. When I asked my father why, he said they had grown apart. When I asked if I could call her, he said she had moved and he did not have her new number. I believed him. For 25 years, I believed him. I got out of bed at 2 in the morning and went back to the toolbox. I emptied it completely this time. Every tool, every screw, every folded piece of paper that had been stuffed in the corners. And in a small zip pouch tucked under the false bottom shelf, the one I had not noticed the first time, I found a second envelope. This one was not addressed to me. It was a folded document. And when I opened it, I realized what I was holding. It was a copy of a formal complaint. Filed by Loretta Osei, my mother, against my father and his business partner, a man named Theodore Aben, to a financial regulatory body. The date on it was 35 years ago, 1 year before I was born. I sat with that document for 2 hours, reading it over and over, and then I went to my laptop. I started searching. Theodore, my father's name, the company they had run together. It took time, and a lot of dead ends, but eventually the pieces started connecting in a way that made my chest feel tight. The complaint alleged that my father and his partner had been running a lending scheme that targeted members of their community, taking money from families, promising returns, delivering nothing. Small amounts from many people, which added up to a significant sum. The kind of thing that ruins people quietly, because the victims are often too embarrassed or too close to the perpetrator to go to the authorities. My mother had found out. She had found the records. She had made copies and filed a report. The case had been quietly dropped. I could not find a clear reason why. What I did find, 2 months after the filing date on that complaint, was a local newspaper article. Brief. Buried. It described a woman being detained for a psychiatric evaluation following what was described as erratic public behavior at a community meeting. The woman's name was Loretta Osei. My mother had tried to expose him, and he had responded by making sure no one would believe her. I closed the laptop and pressed my hands flat on the desk and breathed. I thought about 8-year-old me, sitting at the kitchen table, deciding to stop asking about her because the asking felt like a betrayal. I thought about how carefully I had been shaped, not violently, not obviously, but carefully, methodically, into someone who would never look for the truth. Someone who would accept the story I had been handed, because the story was all there was. I thought about Aunt Philippa, who had stopped coming around, who had perhaps seen something, or been warned off, or been told a version of Loretta that made her step back from us entirely. I cried then. Not the grief cry I had been waiting for at the funeral. A different kind. Older. Like something that had been locked in the same toolbox as that letter. Finally getting air. I cried for my mother, whoever she was, wherever she was. I cried for 8-year-old me. And then I stopped crying, because there was something I needed to do. I am not a dramatic person by nature. I do not like scenes. I do not like confrontation. All my life I have been the one who smooths things over, who finds the diplomatic middle ground, who says, let us not make this bigger than it needs to be. But there is a difference between peace and silence. And I had been silent for 34 years. I spent the next 3 days being methodical. I am an accountant by profession. I know how to build a file. I organized everything I had. The letter, the complaint document, the newspaper article, the financial records my father had kept in his lock study, which I now had full access to. All of it cross-referenced and documented. I found Aunt Philippa. It was not difficult. She was on social media, which I had simply never thought to check before. I sent her a message. I told her who I was. I told her I had found some things and I needed to speak with her. She called me within the hour. Her voice, when I heard it, cracked something open in me. She sounded older, of course, but I remembered it immediately. "I've been waiting," she said. "I've been waiting a long time for someone to call me about this." She told me that she had cut contact with my father because of my mother. Because she had believed Loretta. Because she had seen the documents, had watched my mother try to get help, and had watched my father systematically dismantle her credibility. She had tried to stay in touch with me, but my father had told her I did not want contact, that I had said I found her visits upsetting. She had believed him. She had grief of her own about it. We talked for 3 hours. She told me my mother was alive. I had to ask her to repeat that. Loretta was alive. She was 61 years old. She lived in another state. She had rebuilt her life. She had never stopped thinking about me. Aunt Philippa had stayed loosely in touch with her over the years, through mutual connections, enough to know she was okay. I did not say anything for a long moment. I was gripping the phone so hard my hand hurt. "Does she know he passed?" I asked. I told her. Philippa said quietly, "I hope that was all right." She did not react the way I expected. She just said, "I hope Nadia is okay." My name. She used my name. I called a family meeting. My father's side of the family, the cousins, the family friends who had been at the funeral, the people who had stood at that graveside and eulogized a man they thought they knew. I sent a message to the group chat that had been used to coordinate the funeral arrangements. I said there were some things related to my father's estate that I needed to discuss with everyone. I said it was important. 22 people showed up. I had prepared a packet. Printed copies of the complaint. The newspaper article. A brief, factual summary of what I had found. Organized the way you would organize any professional document, because if I had learned anything from my father, it was how to be thorough. I stood at the head of the table and I said, "I want to start by acknowledging that my father did a great many things well. He raised me. He worked hard. I do not think he was without love. But I also found something in his toolbox this week, and I think the people in this room deserve to know what it contained." And then I told them. I did not raise my voice. I did not perform. I read from my notes, and I laid the documents on the table, and I answered questions calmly. Some people were silent. Some were visibly uncomfortable. A few tried to push back, asked how I could do this when he had just been buried, said it was not the time. I looked at the person who said it was not the time and I said, "The time was 34 years ago. I am a little late, but I am here now." The people who had been taken money from by my father and Theodore Aben, the families who had lost savings and never been repaid and never been given an explanation. Some of them had children around my age who were in that room. I watched those people's faces as the picture became clear. I watched something shift. "The woman you all called unstable," I said at one point, "tried to come back to her daughter. This man turned her away. The woman you all forgot about, tried to warn you. She was silenced for it." Nobody argued with me after that. That was a Thursday. On the following Monday, I booked a flight. I had spoken to her by then. Twice, actually. The first call was 40 minutes long and mostly silence and short sentences, and both of us trying very hard not to fall apart. The second call was 2 hours and I heard her laugh for the first time, and something in me went very still and very warm simultaneously. She had known. She told me. She had always believed, deep down, that the letter might find me someday. She had written it in the hospital, the day after I was born, before she had been fully pushed out. She had slipped it inside a book she left behind, thinking I would find it one day when I was old enough to read. She did not know my father had moved it to the toolbox. She did not know he had kept it at all. Why did you seal it and address it to me? I asked her. If you thought you were leaving it in the house. She was quiet for a second. Then she said, I think some part of me knew I was not coming back. And I wanted there to be something. Even if I could not be there. I wanted there to be something that was just from me to you. I pressed the phone against my ear and did not say anything because there was nothing to say to that. Some things are too large for words. The airport was busy when I landed. I stood at baggage claim, watching the carousel go around, feeling something I could not categorize. Nervous. Hopeful. A little raw around the edges. The way you feel after something enormous has shifted, but you have not yet had time to settle into the new shape of things. She was waiting outside the arrival's gate. I recognized her from an old photo Philip had sent me, though she looked both exactly like I expected and nothing like I had imagined. Shorter, maybe. Her eyes the same shape as mine. She saw me and she stopped walking. We stood a few feet apart for a moment, both of us just taking it in. I said, I found the letter. She said, I know. And that was enough to start. I do not have a clean ending for you, because life does not work that way. My father is buried. I cannot confront him. I cannot ask him why. I am left with questions that will never have answers, and a grief that is tangled up with something close to anger, and something else I do not have a word for yet. But here is what I do know. For 34 years, someone else controlled the story of my life. Decided what I would know and what I would grieve and what I would be allowed to want. Decided that the truth was too dangerous to exist anywhere except the bottom of a locked toolbox. He underestimated the toolbox. And he underestimated me. Because now I know who I am. I know where I came from. I know that I was wanted. That I was loved before I could understand love. That someone sat in a hospital room 34 years ago and wrote me a letter and hoped, with everything she had, that one day it would reach me. It did. And for the first time in my life, I feel like I have the whole story. That is not nothing. That is everything.